we are going to move on now to CSA ASPPPO Joint Short-Term Rental Committee. I'll welcome Beverly Serrell to the stage. We will keep in mind we are still filming, and we will welcome Beverly to the stage. So,
the stage.
Yes, the stage.
It's official. Good morning. I am Beverly Serrell, and I'm a ASPPPO director and also member of the CSA board. And I co-chair this short-term rental committee with Bill Johnson, my cohort back here. Just a little bit of background that this committee began as a task force, I believe in 2014 at the behest of Charlie Ryan, and Mike Jordan served as my co-chairman for the first few years, and then Bill came on last year. And I think that we have done a lot of things. Not maybe as much as we would like, but to Rich's point, we operate within the confines of a very limiting and complicated set of covenants, and we have a very diverse and complicated sort of existence here. On the one hand, with having our primary residents, our non-primary residents, and our short and long-term rental owners all kind of coexisting. At sometimes better than others. You want to start on the first slide, Hannah? So our committee purpose is to advise the CSA and ASPPPO boards in exercising their responsibilities to enforce the covenants, other rules and regulations involving the short-term rentals within the community. Okay, so, and I'll go over this just a little bit and let you all kind of read along as I go. So our responsibilities as a committee to formulate policies and best practices designed to encourage, kind of take in this verbiage, if you will, encourage rental property owners, their agents, their renters to act in a manner consistent with the interests of all property owners in the plantation. I'd say that's our most important paragraph right there, and it does kind of let you know what our limitations are. You know, there's no mechanism within the current covenants for any sort of fining or punishments, if you will, for doing the wrong thing. So very often we're limited to encouraging people to do the right things, and we have done that so far via education and communication. Really. So further on, to the extent permitted by the covenants, we do publicize applicable rules and ordinances. We report to the board our activities on a regular basis, and we advise the boards of our concerns. We can have, will do, recommend the following to the boards for their approval. Statements of recommendations and best practices. We have done that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Methods and manners of distribution of these recommendations, doing a couple of things now, moving different ways in the future as technology allows. Something that we haven't done as of yet, but I think is still kind of maybe on the horizon, is some sort of preferential designation, perhaps given to owners who achieve the sort of best practices, and we coordinate regularly efforts with safety and security gate entry committees to prevent the abuse of the gate fee system. Just to give you a little bit of background on that, so when Toby came into taking over safety and security, there were a lot of people, again, kind of for a lot of different reasons. Either they were purposefully not paying for passes for their weekly renters, or maybe they just didn't know they were supposed to, okay? So, but there was no real process or formula for identifying these people, and in the beginning it took really hunting and pecking through the internet ads to try to identify the owners and who was skirting the system, and we have gotten a real handle on that over the last couple of years, and now that's in a regular process, and we believe we're doing a much better job of communicating with the owners and not having that happen. That's not really an issue with the rental management companies because they are required to, in order to be able to order passes through the system, they have to provide an actual contract signed by the Sea Pines homeowner and the rental company to show that they have the ability or the authorization to order passes and manage that property, and then they're fully in the system. Okay. Excellent. So our membership is comprised of a representative designated by the ASPPPO board and the CSA board. So I'm on both boards, and then Bill was our representative designated by the ASPPPO board. And then we have different representatives with particular knowledge bases, and I'll talk about these people when we get to the next slide. And then volunteer members from within the community. And then, of course, our ex officio members and staff support. Next slide. Okay, so there are Bill and myself and Carl Becker, to whom Rich referred, has been a wealth of knowledge to us. Linda Fierenhoff joined our committee last year. She is a resident of Heritage Woods, which is definitely a rental area. There are really almost no non-rental areas anymore. Almost no. Bob Hawkins is an owner of the vacation company, and also longtime Sea Pines resident. Ted Levitt is longtime owner, rents his property on his own without a management company, and is one of the Beach Street owners. John Monroe is our representative from the Sea Pines Resort. Becky Pardue, who's here today, thank you for being here, lives on Beach Lagoon, and so is in the thick of it in the summer rental months. Dan Westerbeck, also an owner on one of the beach streets, and Dan chairs the property owners, what's the name of his? COA Residence is what I'm trying to say. Mark Griffin attends all of our meetings, also does Brett, Toby, Sarah, and Amanda, so it's quite a group, because short-term rental really does affect everybody, whether it's you personally, maybe are an owner of a rental property, or your neighbor is, so on your street, in your neighborhood. And just to let you know a little bit about me, so I am a primary owner, resident of Sea Pines. For 10 years, I owned a short-term rental property that I started doing on my own. It sort of morphed into a rental arm of my real estate business. So I believe that Bob and I, well, and also John too, can offer kind of multifaceted perspectives of being owners, residents, and also in the business. Okay, next slide. So here are our limitations. We do not authorize any distributions. We do not approve or recommend members, dissolution, merger, etc. This would be similar to what Rich said. We do not select, appoint, or remove directors, and we don't adopt, amend, or repeal articles or bylaws. That must have been like a legal disclaimer, right? Okay, so in 2016, a lot of these things that are kind of ongoing things for us. We updated the community guidelines for residents and guests and reprinted these brochures for distribution. Has anybody, I wish I brought one, has anybody seen the brochure? When we started this, the rules, if you will, were looked like they were on an old mimeograph machine. I don't know if you remember that, and they were sort of posted on a single piece of white paper, and you could pick them up at the CSA office. And then there was no real kind of cohesion between what everybody was out there saying that our rules, regulations, guidelines are. So we took really almost the whole first year to try to achieve, and we did, verbiage that was consistent with our current guidelines, our covenants, and then also what the resort wanted to proffer to its guests, and what we as residential property owners wanted everybody to know also. So that is also on the website, right, Amanda, where would they find that?
It is under CSA rules and regulations.
Okay, CSA rules and regulations. You can go and see that there. There is an actual hard copy version that can be found at the Welcome Center and also the CSA office. And then we have it in PDF form, and we provide that to all of the rental managers. Either however they'd like to take it and give it to their people. Some people do the actual hard copy. Some provide a PDF copy with their app. We do that, or we do both things. And then if a renter or rental guest pulls up to the Welcome Center to pick up their pass at the window, as it's been ordered by an owner, manager, maybe who's renting their own property, they are handed, along with their pass, a hard copy of these guidelines. Okay, so we're doing the very best we can, we believe, at this point, to get those guidelines into the hands of the people who need the information. That will evolve into, when we move through technology, if we have an app for the community, it will be there. We just want them to know. We have held and continue to hold discussions about our most often heard complaints. Parking probably being the most egregious, and what, if any, policies, fines, consequences can be utilized within the current, within our current limitations, and what new rules might be implemented as early as this year. And we're currently working on that now. Our first meeting of the year is actually in March. We've already drafted these preliminary vehicle class restrictions to be submitted to the CSA board at the meeting in March, and we're currently working on that. We have held for, this will be our third year now, pre-season and post-season meetings and discussion with our rental managers. We come into this room and sit down, and Toby actually really spearheads that meeting, and they always have lots of questions, and we do it before Heritage, so we're kind of prepared for that and prepared for summer, and then we like to have a kind of a wrap up in the fall, and we believe that's been very helpful in the past few years. And then we are continuing the evaluation process of determining, any of these rental properties that are kind of skirting the pass. But again, I think that's a much lower on the totem pole as a problem than it had been certainly years before that. Next slide. Before I open it up to questions, I guess I just would like to, as a personal observation, I started off by saying that we've achieved some things, but there are a lot of things that we probably haven't achieved, but there are a lot of things that we probably just won't, quite frankly, ever achieve. And I have lots of people who call me in particular and say that there are 25 bicycles strewn, on the yard beside my yard. What are you going to do about this? And to that point, there are just some things living in a combination residential and resort community that I don't know that we'll ever truly solve. And maybe that's really offensive to some people, but not to others. We have things that we can solve, like noise ordinances and parking when it is determined to be a dangerous situation. But aesthetics are a lot tougher. Coolers in the driveway, towels over the railings. I believe, just from a personal perspective, that we are doing better and we will do better the more we positively try to impact and raise our community up to a higher standard. If we keep our properties, I've noticed it in my business, quite frankly, the better, the nicer, the cleaner we make our properties, the better people take care of them. The worst kind of properties, people don't seem to care so much for. So as we all maybe try to go forward with this and coexist as peacefully as possible, I would like to see us continue try to positively impact. Not to say that there shouldn't be some repercussions and some punishment for violations. I do believe that in other communities, not necessarily on Hilton Head, but other communities that I've been researching in different areas do have that, and that may well end up being part of a future referendum, but I think has to all be part of the same approach. Questions?
I have a comment. I don't know if you can do anything on it. I live here part-time, but I know when I'm here in the summer, there seems to be a lot of people who ride bikes and do not obey the stop signs. And they just come right through and you're making a turn and they curse at you because you have the right of way. Can you publicize to property owners that they really need to, or the bike companies, please follow those guidelines and be more careful? Because there's little kids who screw around like they're riding the Tour de France and it's dangerous.
Right. You know, that's a great example of one of those things that for years we feel like we have done that. It's everywhere. There are stop signs. There are marks on the streets. It is in our guidelines in a big square. It is publicized to all of the bike companies, and still people at home, they don't have to stop, or wherever. So it's a challenge. It's an ongoing struggle. But it doesn't mean that we'll ever give up on doing it, because it certainly is a safety issue.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Dana?
I would like to say that I think you guys have done a great job on trying to get a handle on short-term rentals, and it shows in my neighborhood. But I do have a question. I agree with you when you say that, making positive, encouraging rewards helps people to upkeep their houses. And I think it affects our quality of life, but I also think that the short-term rentals affect our property values. And today, this morning, the January reports came out again, and Sea Pines has slid again in value. And so this is also a little bit of question to Rich on governance. Do we talk about property values in relation to these kinds of things that affect them so directly? And that's a big concern of mine in, heading into the next couple of years. I think that the governance committee is dealing with the covenants and the underlying financial structure and how it relates to the resort, and also the rentals here. And I think when we're looking around and seeing how people evaluate what we're paying and what the hassle is of living in Sea Pines, some people are choosing other communities. And I think that this would be a fantastic discussion between the governance committee and the short-term renter committee to make our community more attractive to residents in the way we govern and the way we manage our rentals.
That is an item that will be on the long-range strategic planning issue going forward.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we were actually talking about that somewhat yesterday. Interesting that you say, I'm probably getting a little off topic here and putting on my realtor hat, as Dana is too, realtor and owner. But for years, one of the things that drove the values up here was the potential for short-term rentals.
Yes.
And it was, okay, so if now, are you thinking then that maybe now that may be swinging in a different direction and that value may be less?
Everything that I'm talking about is anecdotal, which drives most people who have been involved in marketing crazy, because we don't have any research. But being the welcome lady, as you are, for people who are first coming to look here, yes, I do. Last summer I had a lot of negative feedback at the gate, but did I have the numbers to prove it? No. So I think that we need to look at that at some point in a strategic and quantitative way, and see if we can't get some more definitive answers, because my feeling is the tipping point on commercial rental property in Sea Pines is getting close, if not already over.
I get to just add my comment from the government. All of ASPO and all of CSA directors are thinking about this. This was a resort, a community built 60 years ago. And while the resort has invested tens of millions of dollars in upgrading it, we don't have the developer marketing Sea Pines they did 20 years ago to people in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and apparently a few misguided people in Indiana. And that made a big difference on people. That's how we made decisions to come and visit. That company doesn't exist anymore. So we have an aged infrastructure. We have a need to market what we are. But we are a 3-star, I'm borrowing somebody else's language here. We are a 3-star community that wants to be more, but we won't maintain those values if we don't invest. We have the lowest fee on an annual basis of any of the communities, as you know, and that affects our ability to spend what we need to invest. It is true that we have other partners in this that may or may not be paying their, quote, fair is a subjective term, their fair amount, but whether it's a resort, there's no question the resort has invested tens of millions of dollars in the beach club and in the golf courses and the rest of it. There's no question that commercial people that own the center have spent a lot of money renovating and bringing that up. But the question longer term for us is even when they pay their whatever fare is, we still have a need to make a major investment. And it's a significant investment. But we all love our $1,000 a year fee, but 2/3 of the people aren't here. 62% are part-time residents. So does it matter to me if I'm in Chicago if I pay $1,200 or $1,500 or whatever, or appropriate amount? Probably not. But the difference in our community is massive. So yes, we need to get the right payments out of other people, but we have to invest, and we have not been investing. We've been just doing enough to what I call break-fix maintenance. The first example that was different is that, and I had nothing to do with it, was the circle, the Fraser Circle, which is a beautiful improvement. Then we have a little hurricane that hits and breaks the bank for a while. So those are the decisions we're really facing, but everybody's focusing on it. I don't know a director that isn't.
I think that's great, but I think that the answers have to be found with real research rather than
Right.
just guessing.
And that work is going on. On the financial side, that work is going on now. Say, okay, what is it that we need to have from a financial point of view to support what we have today and what we want it to be? And that work is close to being done. And that number is consequential, but it's not consequential to the extent we can't afford it. It's just consequential. But I got to know that. And then I got to find out what is it that these different constituencies have really want. And that's what the long range planning committee is trying to get at. I mean, what's our priority? Is it a community center? Is it a forest reserve? Is it the gate? What is it? And we've got to decide. But being a member of ASPPPO and being a voter, we have a very good election has 40% participation. 60% of our residents don't stand up and speak. It's a little bit like the presidential election. If you didn't like who got won, it's because you didn't show up. So.
Well, hopefully if you get that website going for ASPPPO and you get new buyers on
Yeah.
board as they become homeowners, you will begin a dialogue and a reason to be in touch with ASPPPO, and that membership will go back up. I think there are a lot of things that are happening that are good, but I also think we need some more research on why our property values keep going down.
And I think that, to Michael's point, is the long-range planning committee is where the crux is, the crux of that.
But all these things have to come together, and that's what I think the group's trying to do this year and next year. So when I said it was a work in progress earlier, I still think it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
And we can enjoy our low assessments, quite frankly. I love it. I'm on the beach. I've got a nice house on the beach. I pay the same thing that somebody else does. But does it matter to me if it's $500 more? No. But to an 80-year-old or a retired person with fixed income, it does make a difference for them. So if you have different
Maybe a
constituencies here.
strong backing for a buyer.
Right.
Okay, thanks y'all very much. We'll get those, just a couple more. Becky, did you have something you want to say?
In answer to your question, it's begun to concern me, and I know Michael's been working on this, but it's something I'd love to encourage all the directors to think about doing as quickly as possible. I get a lot of the, monthly publications like Garden Gun and Veranda and all these, pretty shiny magazines. And there are the most fabulous ads for Keola, for Palmetto Bluff, for Charleston, for Savannah. There's never one for Hilton Head. Why are we not jumping up and down on the chamber? I mean, we're paying money to the town. I mean, what is it? So we have got to get proactive about advertising us on a national basis. That should, to me, be like, right up there.
Right, and maybe,
And put it in publications that bring in people that will help to raise our property.
and to live here.
Yes,
You know,
and to live here.
that's something that I talk, okay, we're getting way off.
Never.
But however, instead of, finding people for short-term rental or saying no short-term rental in my neighborhood, why don't we work together to encourage people to come and live here? What a fantastic place to live. like the clients that we would have that say, oh my gosh, how do you live in Seapines with all those people on the bike trails? Well, okay, I don't know, maybe that's 9 weeks out of the rest of the time. It's fantastic. You know, it was what a great, I live in Seapines because I can be in Harpertown in 5 minutes and I can bike to Truffles and we can, it's because, I live because of all that. So it's not necessarily a detriment if we fix kind of the fringe areas. But to your point, Becky, I mean, maybe we could even get together with the different communities. Maybe we don't wait for the town or the chamber, but publicize ourselves. Michael and I will talk more about that.
I know we're working on the video, but we need to get this done.
Get it going. I understand. Okay, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, rentals are one way of attracting future buyers. And if the
We all
rental.
came here. Most of us all came here.
Right, and if a rental is a positive experience, and so, you know, you and I are in the same community, but I think it's gotten better, and one of the reasons is that in our POA, we have the ability to find owners or take away amenities that they want to use if their renters don't follow the rules, and I've seen it improve immensely. And one of the things is, I think some of the other POAs may have that as well. So although the covenants may not allow it from CSA, it is in the bylaws of the covenants of some of the POAs to be able to hold their owners accountable, not the renter, but the owner accountable for their renters following the rules. And sometimes, and I see Toby's here, when a renter is violating the rules, you get the call, but we don't necessarily as a board get that feedback. And if we did, then, and if we see it constantly in the same owner, then we can go after that owner and say, look, other owners, their renters are following the rules, you're not, and we're gonna take away your access to our pool and tennis court, which their renters wanna use, and therefore maybe they'll start following the rules.
Well, the one mechanism that we do have is to restrict gate access. And for things that are truly egregious, then that could be employed now. But I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, some of my research, I really looked at Kiowa as a great example. They have, you can even go on their website and look at it. They have all of their, I guess it's everything, their bylaws and everything, but they have their rules and regulations. They have their entire fine system just laid out there for first, second, third offense. But they have the mechanism to do that. So maybe that's where we go, and that's a piece of the pie, but then there are the other positive things too. Great point. Can we make one more?
I have a question. This may not be the venue, but there are some things that are outside our control that concern me greatly, particularly the traffic circle. And if renters come down and they experience half-hour waits trying to get through that, they're not coming back. And I think that it's more than just our inconvenience. I think this is part of the problem that we have to face as a resort. And I'm not sure what we can do about it. It concerns me.
Good point. I think there are a lot of people who are actually working on that, and it's for sure. One more?
Okay. Over the years, I've been very concerned about the safety of rental properties. Other areas like along the coast, the fire department comes in once a year, ensures that a rental property has smoke detectors that are working, and they also establish a maximum occupancy rate. We don't have this here. I've written letters to the paper on several occasions. I think we have a great amount of liability as a community that we don't face that situation.
You are correct that we don't have that. Yes.
But nothing's been done about it.
But nothing, no, that's true. That's true from the town perspective. I don't know, Brett, do you want to speak to that at all?
Well, it's an ordinance requirement, running off the LLO, and it has not been pressed by the town. For occupancy for residential,
No, you are correct.
there are some items that they're working on, like lockout units and things along those lines, but not specifically for the
I think the only thing that saves us is the fact that less people are smoking these days. Otherwise, I've seen tragedies in other areas where I don't property. It's gonna happen here someday.
Thank you so much for your questions. Beverly will stick around afterwards.